when you start putting your boundaries in place and saying, this is okay for me and this isn't okay for me,
Yeah.
that can put some people offside because
Mm-hmm.
they're used to being able to go in and just, treat you the way they
Yeah.
want to treat you. When you say, no, actually, that's not okay,
Yeah.
again, that takes a lot of stability in you to
Yeah.
say, I want connection, but I want true connection with people that also want connection,
Yes.
not to be manipulated.
Hello, welcome to the Confidence Code podcast. I'm here with Di. My name's Kimmy, and today we have a really interesting topic to talk about and something that I think is relevant for anyone who lives and breathes. So we're talking about tricky relationships, which I think I didn't realize would be the kind of thing that you could really fix in life, right? Like if you have a tricky person in your life, it's always kind of felt like, well, they're just tricky and I just have to deal with it.
Yes.
It's just a big topic and I don't even really know where to start. But I guess I'd love to know about the tricky relationships that you've had in your life. We don't have to name names. And one of them is definitely not sitting right in front of you right now. Yeah, for most of you.
I've got 3 daughters, and I would say, let's think about our relationships in our life from the word go. As a youngster, the first relationships are those with your primary caregivers.
Yeah.
And initially, I guess you're not too aware of any trickiness until you're made aware that you're the trickiness in their relationship. And so there we are right from the outset of, here I am at a very young, I've got a young granddaughter who's 1, and to her, the world's a beautiful place and there's nothing tricky about it.
There's no tricky relationships for her. Yeah.
But once she starts realizing that, I caused this person to respond like that. And then we start to be aware that, and that's where it becomes tricky. Why? Because we're hardwired for connection. And like we said on one of our earlier podcasts, we often give up our authenticity in order to be
to forge that connection
with other people and please them. And so that's where the trickiness begins, in my view.
Yeah.
And all of us experience that at some stage, unless you're really wired to not notice other people and how they're feeling. So yes, have I had tricky relationships? Yes, immensely. And I'm sure you have. And, I have 3 daughters, all very different.
Yeah.
And so it's not like even you can set yourself up to go, okay, well, this is my sort of person and that won't be tricky.
Yeah.
For all of us, we're always experiencing different things in our life. And so even a given relationship where you get along famously with someone, you're going to have moments where it's tricky because one or the other or both are in a state of being that makes it a little tricky to handle.
Yeah.
I think you said something really important. And I too have realized this. I spent my early years tiptoeing around people and trying very hard not to upset anybody. That was tricky for me and probably made life okay for some and tricky for others because they could feel that I was not very comfortable with myself.
Yeah.
But we are the constant in all of our relationships. And like you correctly said, it's my responsibility what I do with what I'm receiving from other people. And when I change my perception of them, everything changes. What's interesting about that, as we talk about this today, is we have to choose to do that. I work with people all the time and I'm always analysing myself. And it's often the case that someone you've known for a very long time and they are a certain way, it's often that we just click into the way we've always been with them.
Yeah.
It's almost like we enjoy saying, oh, how they are.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm in my rights to feel a certain way because they are the way they are.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, once we understand our relationships and the way they roll out for us is our responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
We get to choose how we perceive them. I can look at somebody that has been tricky to get along with, and when I change my perception, I think, you know what, like I'll take my dear mum, for example. I would have said she was a difficult person to get along with. Now, when I really, truly got to know Mum and her history and what she'd lived through and what she had available to her to get by in life, I have the utmost respect for her now. Does that change the fact that she was difficult to get along with? No, but my perception of her changed how I felt about her, which made it different.
Yeah. I think it reminds me a little bit of the way that we understand children when it's like, you know, if they're quite young and don't have the capabilities and tools yet to regulate their emotions. Say we see a 3-year-old throwing a tantrum and we don't go, oh my goodness, that's just, you know, like they should not be doing that. We go, well, they're 3 years old. Like they don't have the tools to regulate their own emotions quickly, you know?
No.
And so we give them that grace and understanding because we have that perspective of you are young and you don't yet have the brain set up to be able to do this. But when we approach our relationships with everyone like, well, actually, everyone's kind of been given a set of tools or accumulated a set of tools over their lifetime to behave the way that they do. And they're not all going to be the same tools as each other. You know, you and me don't have the same tools. You know, we haven't developed the same tools over our lifespan. So we deal with things differently and that makes our personalities different. But then if we approach our relationships with that perspective of everybody, of like, actually, you know, you might not have the same tools as I do to deal with this certain life circumstance or this certain relationship. It does help to kind of be like, just have a bit more grace for that person.
Yeah. And I think when you mention the word tools, for me, a tool is something I think we are equipped with the same tools, but our awareness of the tools. It's a bit like if you and I were building a house and we had a toolbox and we all had the same toolbox, but my awareness of what to do with a hammer
that's
might
true.
be
That's
not
true.
as skilled as somebody that knew.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, we don't know where people have come from. Even my own mother, I had an idea of things that had happened in her life, but I really didn't have an idea of how she'd experienced the world and why she'd experienced it that way.
Yeah.
So I agree with you,
Yeah.
having grace for people. And I think it was it Brené Brown who said, what if we just imagined that everybody was doing the best they could?
Yeah.
And their best isn't our best. And even our best isn't our best at times. You know, we fall short of what we would hope we could achieve. But I think if you do look at everyone and think, you know what, they're doing the best they can today in this circumstance. Even my best on 2 given days will be different because of lack of sleep or you know, other pressures you might have. So I agree with the grace. And it's interesting about children, what you say about children, because I think as a mum, I had very high expectations of how my children should behave. And that came down from what I was taught should be right. And that's really softened over the years. And I think children actually teach us more about how to be in a relationship. I remember I was talking to one of my grandsons years ago, and he was right up close to me and he looked at my face and he said, oh, you've got a spot there. And he just picked it out. And you know, if a friend had done that, you'd be like, well, you just wouldn't do that. But he was speaking so honestly with me. And I thought, it sort of affronted me a bit. And I think, oh, you don't say that.
Yeah.
But it's like they're so honest. And I think a part of the trickiness in our relationships is we're not honest with each other.
Yeah.
And so we're there trying to present some form of relationship, but we're actually not showing up authentically. Definitely. And I think that can start to get really tricky.
Yeah.
And people feel that.
Yeah. So are you saying that basically the secret to having good relationships is your perception of people?
Well, it's interesting when you put it like that, because I think that's a part of it.
Yeah.
But a secret to having a good relationship with anybody is being comfortable and confident in who you are.
Yeah.
Because, and honestly, that's what's transpired with you and I as well. You know, I didn't know who I was and I was trying to juggle these things, not really being secure in myself, which is never going to end well. And the people around me could also feel that discomfort and often not know how to interpret it. You know, they often take it on board as, oh, is it me making them feel that way? And it's like, no, it's not really about anyone else. It's about how you feel about you. And once you feel good about you, which I do now, then I'm not going out there thinking about what you're thinking of me.
Yeah.
I know who I am. I know what I want. I know how I want to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I can stand firm and take what's coming at me and assess it from the place of I know who I am.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's really valuable information. So do you feel like how does boundaries come into all of this? Can you hold that good energy about people, that good perception about them, as well as having good boundaries? Can you have both?
When you say hold a good perception of them, what I know is I will look at someone and think they're doing the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my good perception of them. And I will look for the good in people. It's very easy to spot the things that aren't good.
Yeah.
And I tend to think, oh, yeah, but here's the things that are good.
Yeah.
Boundaries is an interesting one because, again, if we want to please other people, and I did this for many years, I put my boundaries, I don't think I even had them at the start.
Yeah.
And so they just waltz on in and, create havoc.
Yeah.
I had no boundaries. But when you start putting your boundaries in place and saying, this is okay for me and this isn't okay for me, that can put some people offside because they're used to being able to go in and just, treat you the way they want to treat you. When you say, no, actually, that's not okay. Again, that takes a lot of stability in you to say, I want connection, but I want true connection with people that also want connection, not to be manipulated. So I've probably definitely left a few relationships by the wayside because I've actually drawn a line and said, that's not for me. I want real connection, but what you're looking for is more, I don't like the word manipulation, but it is, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. They want you to just be what they want you to be for them.
Their version of a relationship with you, which isn't always going to be a good thing for you or like a healthy thing for you.
And that comes back to what you were saying before. It's not up to us to want to change people to make ourselves feel good. Like if you'll behave this way, I'll feel really good.
And that's not a boundary. Like setting a boundary has nothing to do with how someone else behaves. It has everything to do with, okay, if, if you do this, this is how I will respond. Not in an element to control you, but like this is what I will do for myself.
I remember having a conversation with someone where they were behaving in a certain fashion, and thankfully I was at a place where I thought, you know what, that doesn't align with my values. And so I brought it to their attention and I said, I don't enjoy this sort of behavior. And so if that is something you enjoy, then we'll probably see less of each other. And their response to me was, well, that's very manipulative. They were putting it on me, like you're trying to change me. And I pointed out and was happy to be in the space where I could quite confidently say, no, I'm not saying it with any malice or anything. I'm just saying this is me and this appears to be you. So I don't think we'll spend time together. You're free to make your choice to change if you want to.
That's it.
But if you don't, I'm making my choice to say,
that's right.
Let's not spend time.
I feel like the whole setting boundaries, I read something really interesting in an Abraham Hicks book recently where, and I probably misquote this terribly, but they're basically talking about how we can inspire people by expecting the best version of them from them. And now that's not always going to play out, but if you see someone as the best version of their self, regardless of what's going on, often they'll rise to meet that expectation. So if you're going into everything being like, you are this excellent thing, you are this excellent version of yourself, they'll often kind of be like, oh, yeah, okay. And they'll respond to that. Whereas if you're going in being like, you never do this right, you never do this right, they'll meet that expectation.
When you see the best in somebody, and like you said, some people might say, well, that's not always going to be the case that they'll rise to that, but they will in time. They might not in your first instance, but when you're seeing the best in somebody, because we all have it in us, like the very essence of us is so good. It's well-being, it's everything. So when we see that in someone, it does connect to it and it does draw it out of them and they'll start to become aware of it. So if you see that person repeatedly, however, I agree with what you're saying. If there is someone like that that's not living up to what you can clearly see is better for them, you don't lower your boundary or soften your boundary while there. You do set your hard boundary.
Right.
So you're right. It's saying, look, I'm here, but I can see this in you.
Yeah.
And I've done that with people before where I've not even exchanged words, but I've just held in my mind and my expectation and my energy around them that I know who you are. I can see who you are.
Yeah.
And even the energy alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the attitude we have towards them.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes energy is better described as attitude almost, because it's like the attitude is what produces the energy, the vibes. Like vibes is a really millennial thing to say, I feel, but I actually love that term because it describes things really well. Like I feel like when I meet people and talk to people, I get vibes from them, and it's their energy, right? And sometimes I think that energy is actually just their attitude. And so your attitude towards, your husband or your wife or your, employer, your workmates, your mum, whoever it is, your attitude towards them puts off an energy and they respond to that energy. And so I feel like that's almost like the really important thing to remember, that even in keeping boundaries, those boundaries can have a positive energy behind them. And that positive energy could actually be, no, you're better than this.
Yes.
Like I see more in you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold this boundary because I can see more in you.
Yeah.
And that's putting off this positive energy. It's not holding the boundary in a way that's like, you're so ridiculous.
No.
I'm not even going to respond to that because you're so ridiculous. It's like, no, you're better.
Yeah.
You're good. You are a good person. I'm going to hold this boundary because it's good and healthy for both of us.
Yes.
And that's putting off this good energy that, not very rarely does it happen instantaneously, but often over time, people will then meet that.
They
that
notice
boundary
it instantaneously, I believe, because
oh yes, for sure.
like you said, you're putting out an energy that is attractive to them because the very core of them is that.
Yes.
We all have so much more in us than we might be displaying.
Yeah.
So if someone just connects with that even slightly, it's like there's a real pull from within them towards that. So I agree wholeheartedly with that. Yeah.
So let's quickly talk about probably one of the biggest tricky relationships we've both had in our lives, which is with each other. So for reference, and we've kind of, implied this throughout the conversation, I'm the second of your 3 daughters.
Yeah.
Middle child syndrome is definitely a thing. But we had a very tricky relationship because we had quite similar personalities, but quite different ways of expressing ourselves. And so we both have totally different perceptions of what that relationship was like over the, I don't know, when did I move out? Like 19 years that we, spent in the same house.
Yeah.
And I think that's really common. It's a common tricky relationship is between mothers and daughters or parents and kids, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not the kind of relationship that you can easily put boundaries up in, especially when you're the child, right? If you're a child in a household and you are with a tricky parent, you don't often get the final say in how things play out. But oftentimes the mothers are wanting that really good relationship with their daughters or with their kids. And I think it's such a tricky phase of life to navigate. It's like when you have a tricky parent-child relationship and you've got, upwards of 19 years to like have it out in the same household. It's a lot. What are some of the things that you feel like on reflection would have been good takeaways in our relationship when we were, and obviously we've both had to do a lot of self-work after that anyway. Like there was so much for us to both unpack
talk to this,
separately.
but hold the question, keep me on track here, and we will talk to the mothers and daughters a bit more at the end of this, but I honestly feel like I've done a PhD in mothers and daughters, having 3 daughters within the space of 5 years and obviously bringing them up. Most parents probably feel the same.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to say is it's a very tricky relationship, parents and children, because we're both coming from so if you look at a marriage relationship, for example, 2 people coming together wanting to live together, live life together, you've got the same intention. Parents, mothers and daughters, the mothers want to see the daughters, bloom and blossom and go off and be the best selves. However, that relationship means you were foremost in my mind, you and your sisters, foremost in my mind every single day for years and years and years. I got close to you. I cared for you like nothing else. But that whole relationship was being developed in order for me to then set you free and say goodbye. Craziness. Like no other relationship is like that.
Yes.
The children, the daughters, are growing up and their intention is not, I want to have a great relationship with my mum. Their intention is, I want to get out there and be me.
Yeah.
You know, like give me what I need so I can
learning
go.
the world. Yeah.
And so you can see, I could see increasingly, and I could almost name the ages, where, yes, it starts out as this loving, they love me and they make me feel so good. And then they're starting to learn things and, you know, Miss Sanders is now their teacher and she's the best thing since sliced bread. And there's a bit of a, she's teaching you something that I didn't. And then they move into becoming very independent, which is sort of good and we feel really good about it. But then that independence turns to they're their own people. And I have viewpoints and I don't agree with you. And that can be difficult, especially if the parent, like I was not secure in herself. And so it starts to challenge me. And I remember watching you, and you may have been unaware of this, but you were so sure of yourself. You know, you would go to the edge and beyond so easily and regularly. And it was challenging to herd you in as a parent and as one of the children. But I used to look and think, I want a bit of that. Like you were so full of curiosity and zest for life. And I was so shy and insecure. And so that challenged me to grow as well.
Yeah.
So there were so many dynamics going on, as there always is. And I would say that parenting my 3 daughters was the best self-development course I've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it did make me sit up and look at myself more than anything else ever had.
Yeah.
And yes, thankfully I did do some work on it, you know, throughout really.
Yeah.
But it was a moving target. So
yeah, definitely hard. It's harder to do it in the trenches than it is to do it before or after.
So your question was, what's something that I think in hindsight
we've kind of said really.
Yeah.
It's like doing that growth work and being secure in yourself. And I feel like, because I'm a parent, I've got 2 kids of my own. One of them's, you know, early teenage life and he's a boy, so he's a little bit, I'm not going to say easier because that sounds like the other one's difficult. Neither of them are difficult.
They're different, aren't they?
Yeah, but like he's a lot more kind of just like this, whereas I've got a 7-year-old girl who could pretty much be a teenager if she wanted to be, and she's like this. And both of them are, you know, beautiful personalities, but with the teenager, I was doing a lot of my self-growth while I was parenting him, while he was, you know, like younger. And now we have this really beautiful connection and relationship where we kind of, he's turned out really well, which for me, is miraculous, honestly. But it was very much in the trenches. So it was a lot of trial and error in really early days.
Yeah.
And, you know, whereas with the younger daughter, she's kind of had that stability and I'd done a lot of that work before she kind of came along.
They could.
Yeah, because she's a wild ride. She's so beautiful though. And she's very similar to what I was like as a child, just curious, very easily just pushes the boundaries. But I feel like what I learned in all of that work for myself, that work that you've talked about and described, is that you really have to be okay with being who you are and being sure of that, but then letting other people be who they are and allowing them to figure out their own journey.
Yeah.
And that's probably been the hardest thing, is it's like we don't see this same thing eye to eye. And, you know, the parent in me wants to go, no, this is my opinion and my opinion is right because I've got 20 years on you.
Yeah.
But instead actually just going, is that like, that's how you view that? That's what you think about that? That's the conclusion you've come to in your, you know, period of life. I love that for you.
Yes.
Like, you know,
yes.
walk with that and see where it takes you.
And that's what I've watched you do. And I've really enjoyed watching you parent. And like you said, for every single parent on the planet, they don't come with a 7-year course before.
Yes.
It's like, here's your child.
Yeah.
Best of luck.
Yeah.
And we do bring all that we've got. But I do like the way you've done that. You are, this is for you. And I think that's the thing I would add in hindsight. If I was clearer on my role as a parent, which was, yes, to be me, fully me, confidently show my children what it looks like to be yourself. And then my task as a parent was to enable and help and encourage them to get to know who they are and be fully themselves, which is no threat to me.
No. And it's not a bad thing if it doesn't look the same as who we are. And I think that's the scary thing as a parent is we've really tried to open up choice to our kids from a very young age. Like, okay, we want you to have autonomy in your life, the way things look, the boundaries we have with you, you're a part of that development system.
Yeah.
We're not just going to be like, you have to do this, or you know, this is, you know, the boundary we have on you. It's a discussion of like, okay, what do you think is fair in this situation?
Yeah.
Cool. Here's what we think. Let's meet halfway. Now there's safety that comes into this as well. Like, you know, with a certain ages of kids, you have to be like, you can't just skip across the road without looking. Like that's just, you're going to be a pancake. That's the reality of that. But in the things that are safe for them to have choice, it's important that they learn to make choices for themselves because that helps them to know who they are and but also what kind of person they want to be. They can make a choice and it could be a really not great choice. And from that, they've made that choice for themselves. So they can go, actually, that didn't align with who I wanted to be.
And right there, you've opened up something that brings to mind for me that as our children grow older and even in that relationship where I gave someone a choice and said, you know, this is my choice I'm making. You have a choice and that will determine how we move forward. Same with our children. And like you said, they often make choices from their place of understanding, but we have to let them make, and as the older they get, the more risky some of those choices are. And you and I have been right there. And there were a lot of choices you made where I would dearly love to have, you know, bound you up, put you in a cupboard for a few years just to keep you safe. But we're not made, a bit like an ocean liner, we're not made to stay safe in the harbour. We're made resilient and, you know, adaptable to go out and sail the seas and learn what we learn. And you are a richer, much more interesting person because of what you've experienced. As a mother, though, you were always my little girl and I just want to put you in a cupboard and keep you safe.
Yeah, it's a really hard line to walk, isn't it? That, you know.
And so those boundaries that we set for ourselves, but then we try to set boundaries for our children and they very often crash them and want to go further. And we, like you said, we must allow them and encourage them to be themselves.
Yeah.
So they are tricky. That they would be the trickiest relationships.
Yes, definitely.
In the world.
And I think there are some kids that are really happy to just trust like in all of the choices our kids have made, we've given them our insight and opinion. It's not like we just go, hands off, you can do whatever you want. We're like, okay, well, here's what we've learned. Here's what we think. Let's hear what you think. Here, what have you learned? How are you going to make that choice with all the information you've been given? And some kids are really happy to just go, oh, do you know what? I actually trust your information and your experience. I'm just going to go with what you said. And sometimes that leads to them not fully really knowing themselves because they never explore those boundaries. But sometimes, you know, it can work both ways. But then there are some kids like me that was like, I'm going to not listen to absolutely everything you say. And I'm going to go my entire own way just to prove a point. And that is hard to watch. It's hard to be like, okay, sure, you go and do it your way. And sometimes it works surprisingly well for them. And sometimes it really doesn't.
And I think the other thing about mother-daughter relationships and mother-son, you know, I only have experienced mother-daughter, is that the other aspect is the choices they make do influence our lives.
Yes, definitely.
Unlike someone that you're completely separate from and you think, if you choose to do that, you go that way, I'll go this way. But children, it is different and it can influence your life in a great way. And so we have a vested interest as well.
Definitely.
So there's so many components to
it.
And
even that aspect comes back to the whole boundaries thing. Like I remember there were choices that I made that you guys just went, okay, if that's what you're going to do, that's your choice. But here's our boundary. So like we're not going to come and, you know, pick you up after 3 a.m. in the morning. Actually, I'm pretty sure you guys were always like, we will keep you safe. Like that was always a thing. But you definitely, there were times where you were like, you've made this choice and
I'll come
this is our boundary.
I'll come this far, but no further. I remember one day we had a conversation and again, you know, more in our mothers and daughters group, we go into a lot of detail there about our experiences together. But there was a day when you looked at me and said, you know what, I get it. I've made my bed. I have to lie in it and you're not going to lie. I don't think you said that. I said, yeah, I'm not going to lie in it with you, but I will be right here beside you as you walk that. And that was a boundary that I clearly had made for my own well-being. So I think that's one secret trick in tricky relationships. We must have the best relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, that's
we
it.
must put on our oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we are no good.
Yeah,
I tried the other
exactly
way,
right. And it doesn't work.
for anybody.
You just end up exhausted.
For anybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned there mothers and daughters group. This is something that has been in the pipeline for a very long time.
Probably as long as you've been alive, really.
Yeah, that's true. This mothers and daughters community where we are going to host a community of mothers and daughters. All, mothers and daughters are both welcome. It may end up being a bit more of the mothers, potentially in the beginning, but
although I would encourage daughters too, because it's like daughters are out there tearing their hair out. I'm a daughter, and I was tearing my hair out going, how do I deal with this mother?
Yeah.
And so
our aim with this group, and by the time we release this episode, it will be up and running, and I'll include the link in the description as always, but I feel like I would love to talk to you about what your vision for this group is.
Whew. Like you said, this has been a long time coming. You are now 20 years on from where we were when it was really starting to get hairy for us. And for any of you that don't know our story, we've got a couple of episodes that just talk about it. This group, because when I was back there 20 years ago, life was still happening for me, running business, other children, my own life going on. I felt like I was drowning and losing the most precious thing that I had, which was my relationship with one of my daughters.
Yeah.
And there seemed to be nobody out there that could help me.
Yeah.
There was no books on it. I was desperate. I felt desperate for just give me something. Family didn't know, and a lot of people were running away more than coming towards me because they didn't know either.
Yeah.
And it was pretty hairy stuff. So this community, my heart for this, and I believe yours is similar, we want to have a place where people can come and have real conversations with people who have had experiences, and we had many over the years. There was a real deep tunnel that we went through and came out the other side, thank God, literally, with our relationship more intact than ever. And it just keeps getting better. So I feel like, let's give back some of what we have now on board from a very real place of understanding and experiencing it. A safe place for people to come. That's not about anything except giving people support, encouragement, real experience to talk through.
And I think I love that you've identified that it's going to be a safe place, because I think one of the trickiest things about parenting is no matter where you go, it feels like people just have really strong opinions of how things should be going for you. And that was something that you probably struggled with a lot. You would talk to a lot of people about what was going on and they'd be like, well, she's obviously gone off the rails and you obviously just didn't do a very good job of, this, that, and the other.
Judgment.
Tons of, even if it's masked as I'm telling you this to be helpful, oftentimes it just feels like judgment. And so we really want this space to be somewhere where you can be like, these are our frustrations, these are what we're struggling with, and we're not going to be like, well, it's because you did this, this, and this, and you need to do this, this, and this better. It's not going to be about that. It's going to be about, okay, well, here was our experience. See what you can glean from that. It wasn't perfect, and it hasn't, it never is. You're always just trial and erroring everything.
Doing your best,
But it's just that community where we can kind of share with each other and go, this is what's worked really well for us. You'll hear from us who has that, we've been through it and come out the other side.
And there were days where I didn't think either of us would. And that's what I want people to understand. This is not just some flitty, surface level thing.
No.
It was big, and all of our family know
everybody.
Big, although you and I most of all. And I think the thing I want to underpin it with is, as I would now if I was a parent of a young person, is encouraging people to follow and listen to their intuition. Like you said, we're not telling people do it this way, do it that way, but your intuition is always guiding you. As a daughter, as a mother. And there were times when my intuition was screaming and I listened to the people around me rather than my own heart. And I would encourage any mother, your heart is going to show you the way. So listening to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll encourage that.
Yes. Yeah. I'll have the link in the comments, in the description below.
Yeah.
But this has been such a great conversation. It's something we're both really passionate about, parenting and relationships.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for, fleshing this out with me. And make sure you check out the description with that link to our Mothers and Daughters community. Thanks for joining us today.